Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Poetry Room at City Lights. I'm Peter Marabellis, your host, and to those of you online, hello to you too. Thank you for joining us. As always, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush peoples. It is, of course, always an honor and a pleasure to be able to do so. It is also a great pleasure to be able to welcome back to the house Michael Thomas. Award-winning first novel, Man Gone Down, we had featured when it first came out. It was such a pleasure to have him, and now to have him back in the house again. We've been a huge fan of his work for many, many years. We are, of course, celebrating The Broken King, which is something of a memoir, but it's much, much more than just that. It kind of follows, in a way, in a trajectory that kind of, plays with some of the ideas in Man Gone Down, but is much more personal in many ways, yet also very compelling, very powerful prose. And though the story is personal, it also really speaks to us regarding America's issues around race, class, family, community, and how one copes with the contradictions of a culture at odds with itself. Kudos to Grove Press for really, over the years, standing behind their authors is something that, they're one of the great presses of the United States that together with like New Directions and City Lights and so many others that have just, over the years, just really put great value on working with authors and helping them kind of develop their work. And so really very grateful that they produced this wonderful, wonderful book and have now brought Michael to us once again here at City Lights. Mr. Thomas's writing has appeared in A Public Space, in the New York Times, and in Ben George's anthology, The Book of Dads. He's, of course, a professor of English at Hunter College. He makes his home in Brooklyn. For those of you online, we are posting links with which you may purchase the books. For those of you here, we're going to have a little signing. We're going to try to get everyone kind of on that side of the room and sort of form a little line afterwards. And for those of you also who buy books tonight online, we will have signed copies. So there will also be a little bit of time for Q&A. So please join us now in offering a warm welcome. Welcome to City Lights, sir. A pleasure.
Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Thanks to City Lights, Peter, Paul, and everyone here. It's one of my first readings, the professional writer. Reading at a store, institution that I loved as a child and heard about as a child that my father lectured me. And thank you to embarrasser, Elise Cannon. My eternal frenemy. Is strangely, I don't like to admit it, been behind this and really me, my career. I don't think I'd be a professor or really any of these things without her. So thank you, Elise. It's been a long time. Yeah, thank you to Grove, Morgan and Tricken, Elizabeth Schmitz, my editor. They've been behind me. I think any other house would have dropped me in the, I choke to say it's 17 years of writing this on and off, but they really supported me, kept me alive, sent me checks that weren't mine, and here they are. It's really strange when somebody wants the best for you. It's hard to believe. I still don't. I think it's going on in another arena, in another life to another person. So anyway, this book, very strange with the microphone, hot mic. So once I wrote it and put it out and edited it, I have no memory of it. And now that I've started reading it or parts of it for readings, I realize how really oppressively dark it can be at times. So I've been reading the same excerpt because it's the happiest part of the book. I tried in Connecticut, one section, and I looked up at the audience and they were doing the please give me Prozac or something, martini with more martini. But here I am, and I have to deal with the fact that this is not a fiction. This is, I suppose, my life. But here at City Lights was really one of the last happy times I had. This book is, a lot of it's about race and class and trauma and fathers and sons, but a lot of it's about mental illness. And I had like my first big adult break across the streets after this reading. So this has always been like this sanctuary in my mind, a place to make it back to. And like just seeing Paul, Peter over the years, it's been really affirming. Okay, enough of the modeling stuff. Now we'll get back to my coarseness. So I think I'm going to read about birds instead of mental illness or trauma. Yeah, this is traumatic enough. So this section is called What Pip Saw. I'm not going to start lecturing on Moby Dick, but this is a section about my second son. His name is Miles, and when he was 8, he was diagnosed with a non-specific cognitive disorder. That's what they called it in the earlier part of this century. Now they call it neurodivergence. When I was a kid, they called it something else. I can't say it. But at that time, the evaluator, when she said non-specific cognitive disorder, she looked over and said, like father, like son. And I was like, I said, what the fuck are you talking about? And my Miles' mother looked at me and said, don't you know? I said, know what? And so it was then I discovered that I was non-specific and had a cognitive disorder. So I was 40. So this chapter is largely about having a son who's 8 at this time, who is neurodivergent and coming to grips with that. And we're on a bird walk in Central Park. So I'll just start from there. So it's what Pip saw. He saw God's foot upon the treadle of the ruin and spoke it, and therefore his shipmates called him mad. That's from Moby Dick. We got out, just the two of us. He still liked holding hands, and at the bottom of our Brooklyn stoop he took mine. Until he spoke, people often believed he was a couple of years older than he was. His voice, unlike his older brother's gravelly tenor, was high and thin. His big body lacked gravity too, but he wasn't light. His skip was more of a lumber. His bones were thick and large. He was painfully solid, and it hurt to collide with him. Still, he didn't seem to be all there. It was how he looked and looked at. He didn't focus on anything for more than a few seconds, not on the material plane anyway. He seemed to be studying forms in other realms that demanded his deepest concentration. Wherever his attention was, so was a portion of his density. And all of this imbued him with a flightiness that belied his mass. And so, his hand in mine, without shame, he thumped lightly beside me, chattering about whatever appeared to him, unaware of what a strange partner he was. Too big, too gone, and at least with me, too white. But he wasn't anybody's white boy, he was mine. And while it was difficult for strangers to reconcile the two of us together, it was obvious to us and those who bothered to look and listen that we were father and son. So we go to Central Park to look for birds. We can't get that right. Miles had a list of birds he wanted to see. Inseriformes, Capricornuliformes, Carthididae, and of course, Hyraeus. I told him that I wanted to see an owl in the wild, that I'd only seen traces or heard them in the distance at night. He cleared his throat. Stringsiformes. He turned to me, looked at the path, and raised an eyebrow. In the distance, I heard Lunar Nimoy say, fascinating. Then from the window of the Museum of Science, I sensed behind the mist the esplanade. I stopped abruptly and stood at attention. Miles slowed and folded his hands behind his back. The only diurnal owl in these parts, I believe, is the screech owl. He stopped and softly pointed at a nearby tree. It's mating season. They will be screeching. He cleared his throat again. I thought he might try to mimic one. He didn't. Instead, he made sure that I knew the differences between the regional members of their order and haltingly offered a prosaic ode to hawks, though I don't think he realized he was doing so. We didn't have his Audubon guide or the notebook in which he'd written the names. While I was confident that we'd remember our catalog, I was worried what would happen when the birds didn't present themselves in that order. He seemed okay, though. The mourning doves and chickadees seemed to have granted him enough time until they did. We walked casually through the middle of the park. If he hadn't occasionally talked about the birds he heard, either real or imagined, I might have forgotten why we were there. We were alone now. The paths were empty. No one seemed to be coming. He spoke. Spinus tristis. I looked down at him. He was grinning. He continued. The American goldfinch. Spiny sorrow. Nothing. Then, they won't be bright now. Have you heard one? I asked. Why, yes, several. Which is theirs? He paused and leaned back. Do you hear that one? Among cooing doves and the clamor of jays, the tweets and whistles were a blur. I shook my head. He seemed pleased. I tried to focus. Do you hear? I thought I could. There's a second song to a second song. He cleared his throat and tried to stretch up to the sound. Par-tee-tee-tee-tee. He looked at me partially and waited for my response. I tried. Par-tee-tee-tee-tee. It's hard for you. Your voice is low. Well, I raised my eyebrow and pointed up at nothing. Perhaps we should keep moving before something we don't want to know responds. It's okay. He checked the air. It's okay. It's a different thing when you begin in a quiet place to enter one that is quieter still. You bring peace with you. We could be quiet and look for things, and he would tell me the birds we saw. Some I knew, some I misnamed, some I didn't name. There were traces of other creatures. We had to track them. There were signs of that which might have been there. We left the path and wandered through the mist and between the trees. Sometimes we held hands, sometimes we drifted apart, but we were still apart. We knew the other was there. He didn't need to lecture or even talk about what we saw. He didn't tell me what I should look for. We didn't need to share our experiences or make them real. Miles called and sang to himself and didn't mind whether I was listening or not, only that I was listening to something deeply. When I was a boy, I wondered if I existed and if I was here. I had to see something that would tell me I was real and present, and I had to wait for it to come. I still wonder. Chock full of nuts is that heavenly coffee. My parents didn't drink that. My father liked instant. I used to make it for him. I can feel his voice in the lower regions of the boiling water and his wheeze in the punctured can of carnation. I can feel his razor stubble in the freeze-dried grind. But my mother isn't there, not in the taster's choice. She's not in the corningware percolator or its blue flowers. She's in the bacon grease. Hot danger. Sunday mornings. Good Sunday morning. The sizzle, the cast iron pan, the blue flame, the oily rainbow and soap suds, the lard she'd never use in the U-band can, like her pupils, soft ivory, salty and sweet. A Virginia I'd never know is sunlight behind dust. I can't find her. She could still be in the kitchen near me, but I can only feel her in the popping grease. My father isn't there. He's in his car. I'm alone with him in the front seat. Seattle Street, right on Cambridge, bear right, then a half mile along the tracks to the Lincoln Cafe. The darkened bar with the dark white men, the empty tables, the light in the windows of the kitchen's double doors. I get to push them open. There's relief in the oven's radiant heat. My father is in the thick cut of pepperoni that Angelo offers me, still on the knife. But pizza night was Friday night, and I can't find my way home, not even through the grease burns. My mother dropped the skillet. My mother threw the skillet when she caught me feeding the dog salami. The handle broke off. There was a V cleft in the side. Back on the stove, we moved it by hand with a dish towel. How do I get to the cleft iron pan, and how do I get back? I don't know if I can or want to return to the judgment I'll face, but I can't remain there picking at the flaking metal. I can't hide in the pantry cabinet. I don't know what will find me. I need time to return, and I might return with nothing. I don't know what I need now, but then, believe me, if you had stayed where we'd parted, I would have come back to you. Par-tee-tee-tee-tee, the sorrowed bird in the mist. His was a love song, not because it celebrated his love, but his hope for it. This is how love sometimes must be. I felt a sadness that didn't seem to be mine. It felt too old and too great. I didn't want to carry it. Then somewhere in the mounds and trees of the park was Tristan, alone, but at the beginning of the story, recounting. First time ever I saw your face. From the age of 10 to 11, we moved 3 times in a year, and I went to 4 schools. Beth Clavens. Unlike the distinct freckles on her cheeks, the cluster around her nose formed a little cloud. When I was 16, I walked Sarah Moore's home. It was Friday, late April, the first day of short sleeves. We were trying hard to deny that we liked and might be liked by the other. I remember I didn't want or know how to be near her, so I started talking about the stars we couldn't see and how there's something always beyond. I've been reading Douglas, Emerson, Melville, and Thoreau. I started with a joke about being lost in the middle of the previous century. She laughed, but I don't think she thought it was funny. I lectured, then apologized, and lectured on apology and cosmic humility, but that made me feel alien and distant, but also known, present. My presence was a burden. My heart seemed far from me, but I still felt it break a little. Somewhere, I started writing a tragedy about love that couldn't be. I felt desperate and robotic. I apologized again. She laughed again. She was there because she wanted to be. We walked. We neared her house. I started talking about Walden, red ants and black. We crossed a busy street and stopped on a median. In the thin grass and sand were small anthills. I gestured for her to watch with me. I told her, the universe does not make us small. She knelt and watched the busy citizens. I told her that they were fire ants. She froze. I laughed. She looked up at me, perplexed. I smiled, bent, and gently raised her by her forearm. Our hands came together as we stood. We looked at each other for the first time. For a moment, I got to show her how and what I love. She smiled. I think I did too. Both girls were white. Both accounts are still painful to recall. The hurt, though, doesn't live in being spurned or dumped. It's in every instant I, for whatever reason, couldn't or wouldn't allow myself to feel peace, hope, freedom, or love. And I don't mean that I hope for a white girl to love me, or that when there was peace in our land, we could be free to love. It was that I often felt flawed. I lacked basic knowledge most others, white and black, had, and my life was tragic. I didn't know how I'd inherited such an existentialist belief. It pre-existed my reading their texts, but I'd learned just in time to die. I spent a lot of time seeking corroboration, but I wasn't completely convinced of my fate. I knew, though, sometimes only dimly, that the most desperate sounding songs were hopeful. No matter how grieving she sounds, Roberta Flack always reminds me that there's shared joy that can fill the world and last forever. An older white couple paused behind us. They'd been listening. Miles turned to them. He looked at them as if they were students who had entered his class late. He cleared his throat and continued to differentiate songs and calls. I watched them. They didn't know why this boy was alone in the park lecturing about a bird who wasn't there. I don't know if they were more confused or relieved when Miles took my hand and led me away. Regardless, the couple followed. This happened a few more times with different people until Miles was leading a group of 7 into the center of the park, explaining the nuances of voicings and plumage, anecdotes about the intelligence of crows and ravens and how to tell them apart, old and new world vultures, and misconceptions concerning owls. We left the paved walk and ascended a small hill along a winding path. We stopped about 10 yards before a makeshift camp of a shopping cart, milk carton, shreds of blue tarp, garbage bags, and sodden cardboard and blankets. Like everything else, the barren branches, the dim air, and our silence made each item stand out. I know he saw it, but I don't know what it meant to him. If he asked the question, who lives there? Who did he imagine, and why? The unhoused and the very poor people in his life were predominantly black or brown, and I think I was the wealthiest black person he knew. I could tell he wanted to say something, but didn't know what. I wondered if he pictured what color whoever lived there was, if he immediately saw them as brown. He certainly had the data to suggest such, but I don't think he had the apparatus to engage, not in the moment. My father never seemed to have the ability to do so, and at times the willingness. The isms and schisms hadn't aesthetic, philosophical, or moral unity. Of course, I didn't think at it at the time. I only heard my father idly humming. He was somewhere in those trees. I wondered if Miles was hearing more than the birds and the distant city traffic. I wondered if he heard what his followers hadn't said. What had Miles assigned to race? And if he had assigned anything, what was it? He thought of himself as brown. Had he considered what that meant? If so, he needed more than what the white people in his life had offered. For it seemed to me that all they could do when challenged was retreat to the sanctuary that privilege affords. How would I begin to talk to my white son about that person or people who might live there? How would I convince him that we were bound to and responsible for them? If one really believed in what was good and right, one could never look away from anything in any world. Our first responsibility was to see the privilege of doing so. Our second, to know that what we see has consequence and weight. None of this was Miles's problem. He had two parents and he was white, but then none of this should have been mine. So perhaps it was everyone. Miles told everyone, I am brown. In his self-portraits, he's brown, yet he was praised for how white he looked, and thus would never be imperiled by being seen as black. But is acute and chronic suffering the ultimate credential for being black? Or is it what you make of any or all individual or collective pain? I've been told many times that I wasn't black. I didn't sound black. I didn't act black. I didn't like black things. Somehow my life resided within that scope and judgment. I was assessed, defined, and filed. If I challenged the conclusion, I was a problem. I wanted something more from my son. I wanted him to know that there was more than living life in the gaps and on the fringes of anxious white people. They knew only of closed systems in which, if they hadn't already, would spin themselves hollow. I wanted him to know that there was something larger than all of us, with which we had to comply. Death, yes, but also life. A life among others, regardless of who those others were. And the guidance through this life, though it had everything to do with humans, wasn't a product of human affairs. I wanted to tell him that if there's an end to suffering, one must first learn to live with it. Everyone's. I wanted to tell him about the soul. We all had one, and he could sing about his and everyone's, even if he was anybody's white boy. He was my white boy. And so he was young, gifted, and black, mulatto, quadroon, or whatever he was. He'd been given so much, two-ness at least, the one drop at least. And in the one drop was something old and faithful and triumphant, seemingly not of this world, but of course it was. It's us and our willingness to always look beyond this world while living in it. This twinned life made us deeper and wider. Jesus hadn't, nor would he ever save black people. Black people had and would. Perhaps we had and would continue to save this country because of what we have given and not taken. I wanted to tell him about the blues. You want to hear about the blues? I remember riding the Orange Line. Anybody from Boston? I remember riding the Orange Line only one time. It was one way. I was 5. We were going to visit my paternal grandmother. My father was still living with us, but he didn't take us. I don't know why. I'm certain, however, that he wasn't there. I see him at work in downtown Boston at Gilchrist department store, or I see him in the lounge at the Ramada. He might not have been at either location, but I can't see him on the trolley. I've never seen him on the trolley. He would have driven, but he did not. His car had failed inspection and the windshield was covered with a red rejected sticker. But those laws would come 3 years later, I think, so that probably wasn't the reason. I know, though, that my mother's Tempest was parked in what had been our cornfield. There were hornets in the trunk, mice in the seats, and mosquito and dragonfly larvae in the footwell puddles. My mother had promised us pepper steaks. I didn't know how we'd get them. There were only 2 sub shops I could tolerate. Their griddles didn't taint the beef with mushroom and onion. They were only accessible by car and in the wrong direction. Of course, she'd made her own, which were, of course, better than anything any place had. I was charged with packing the cold aluminum stumps into a Star Market bag. The subs were too short, they weren't wrapped in wax paper, the grease couldn't render the foil translucent, there was no steam, sharp with salt and mellowed by fat. Fortunately, for all of us, we were out the door before I could speak. On the porch, I'd wonder if only one of my socks was right side out. I thought to look down and check. She must have been exceptionally tired, stressed, and sad, and I might have been wondering if the lights would be back on when we got back home, if she had enough money to get us back home, and why she had chosen to take us to visit a woman who hated her, the mother of a man who would soon leave her. I was wondering about our lunch. Wondering isn't the word. I was reliving all the hidden soggy onions I'd bitten into and how it felt to have my mother watch. I wouldn't look up. I tried to pretend that I hadn't noticed the fungi in vegetables or had suddenly grown to like them. And if I couldn't convince her, I'd rather she threatened to slap the food out of my mouth than apologize to me. I didn't want to hurt her with me. I was trying not to worry that the meat was sliced and not shaved. None of us saw him, not even my mother, when she passed out her handcrafted sandwiches. Not even when I opened mine. Suddenly he was sitting next to me. He was staring across the aisle. I looked away. He looked at me. We did this multiple times. Finally, we looked at each other. His face was very dark. His eyes were pale gray. He looked away and mumbled, "Can I have a bite?" I didn't answer, still looking at seemingly nothing. "Can I have a bite?" I would have told him no. Even now, I can't share bites or sips, though I will give anyone a piece, pour them a portion, or give them all I have. That was too much to explain for both of us, so I remained silent. He turned to me, empty-eyed. "You won't help anyone, not even your own color." He left. No one else saw him. My mother threatened me, something to do with peppers and how I better not look for them. I forced it all down and later vomited on the tracks. Neither my mother nor my siblings saw, though they must have. I don't remember the visit. We took a cab home. My mother paid in change. The driver, a fat old white man who smelled terrible, called her a bitch, but only after she'd gotten out. When we got inside, Neil Diamond's song Sung Blue was on WHDH. It was wrong. It was and is an atrocious song. It's vapid while claiming knowledge of the blues. I didn't need to feel better. I needed to know how to ask what's going on, which might have been playing a few turns up the dial, but WILD didn't have a cash call jackpot. But the lights were on. My mother was happy to be home. And in my head, out of a mix of brothers greeting brothers, I heard the alto sax rise, the rim shot echo, the bass stroll, and Marvin, tenor and falsetto, show me what I could do and how I could be the next time. This is a quote, not me, it's James Baldwin. The person who distrusts himself has no touchstone for reality. If this is still true, which I believe it is, then integration demands we all find the rock and cling to it. But integration still is confused, perhaps willfully, with assimilation, even erasure. Be it the Sisyphean, the lodestone, the ragged, or the rock of the soul, this is reality. To assimilate in this country at this time, one must habitually refuse to acknowledge facts, surrender any hope for living an ethical life, and capitulate to the attitudes and actions by and with which we cruelly defend our unrealities and brutally multiply and expand them. One cannot trust themselves if attitude, desire, opinion, and fear are the measures by and how they judge themselves and others. The rock is a hard thing. America will be great when its people accept the responsibility or are allowed the opportunity of learning how to renew themselves at the fountain of their own lives. This fountain can only heal if we have faith in perpetual rejuvenation. I think we must forget the self to restore the self. Back then, when I talked to my teenage friends about Sarah, they'd say I was a hopeless romantic. People say it now. They were and are confused. For romanticism is the substance of the pragmatic, whose first and last action is to hope. 2 more pages? 2.5. The tour abruptly ended. The white people departed. Miles and I stayed. We stood holding hands. He looked quiet and very sad. "Icteridae," he said. After a long silence, he was pointing at a small patch near a pile of takeout containers. "A blackbird?" "A red-winged blackbird." He sculpted its shape from the air, though the color pattern through the wings is red and yellow. "Jaundiced." He ignored my comment. "The stripes make it appear to be in flight." He looked away. "That's a male. It's beautiful." "Yes," he said. "The colors seem to make it fast, but then they're just red when you see it quickly and from afar." It flew. "It's going to be a cold, wet evening," I said. "Quite." He looked about, then back at the encampment. "My mother used to tell me, you don't have sense to coming out the rain. We should keep moving." His jaw started quivering. I took it as a yes. We walked slowly and without purpose. If we didn't move, the rain wouldn't come. We could stay and wait and recover what it seemed we'd lost, or what I thought we'd lost. We were both looking elsewhere. I didn't know what he sought, but I sensed whatever Miles was seeing wasn't all benevolent. I had memories of being frightened in my head. When I was his age, on some nights, the darkness in my room simply meant the lights were out, and on others, it meant I was going to die. In between the two, where I think I often lived, simplicity was baffling. I wet the bed because there seemed at times a scrim between me and the toilet. I couldn't teach myself how to tear through an MT. My parents, opposed as they were, both said, "It doesn't make sense." That phrase didn't make sense. Reason was intellectual. Sense was a physical experience. I felt that they demanded I be an active participant in making it. I felt a failure because I couldn't. I couldn't show them how or tell them that my basic needs were so distant that they could have been someone else's. I couldn't find the bathroom and I couldn't stay in the chilling wet sheet, so I tried to make another place to be, the past from which I could extract a gentle memory, the future in which I could be alone. Would Miles have to be alone? One of the crueler things we can do to a child is normalize societal pathology. It forces them, if they're to thrive, to rely on wit rather than gestated wisdom, all the while trying to maintain the basic principles that separate right and wrong. They covertly practice ethics within themselves. They must somehow find, without becoming a martyr or a sociopath, sanctuary for beauty, dignity, and love. If there is a light inside them, they must keep it from going out. And while their inner cosmos is unfathomable, the world outside is dangerous. The problem of the 21st century is still the color line, the class line, the gender line, all of it. I see Du Bois, wandering as lonely as a cloud. The line is something we not only must dare to cross, but also look up and down and wonder when it will end. How will we let each other be? It seems still impossible to do so. It will always seem impossible until we choose a life of meaning over a life of comfort. Those who believe that a comfortable life is a substantive life will never discern the difference between fear and danger or offense and harm. Most white people I know, even those I love, won't understand what a drag it is, not only to see them, but to be with them and watch them fret and grind about everyday trivialities. But for me, to lament another person's pain is to trivialize what I've suffered. So few of us get to travel the road of freedom. Most of us are lost or waylaid along the way. I made it. I believe that when one is free, onus becomes responsibility, and responsibility is a privilege. We get to choose how we try to help others be free. So few of us get to freely love. For many of us, the thought of being in love is perilous because the act of love is punishable by death. But the chance to love and be loved is our birthright. The experience is an honor, and no human can and no God would revoke this. We might not choose who we are or who we love, but we can choose how we act in love. And even if we've never been free or have loved in freedom, can't we hope it for others? Miles and I were still alone together. The birds were still singing. The sky didn't threaten rain. There was no fight here. Though I remembered why we'd come, and I sensed our reason was right, I squeezed his hand and pulled him back to the road. Thanks.
Take a deep breath.
Sorry.
We would like to open it up now for comments, questions, and for those of you online too, please post them in the chat function of your Zoom dashboard. I got one back here. Which, hold on. There you
Michael, thank you so much for such an amazing book. But I think the chapter you just read is a perfect example for all of us of how you're able to go from the particular into the universal and back and forth. But my question is, how was the process of creating a chapter like that?
And I'm going to try to answer without being flippant. I hope I don't sound cold. It's really just about tamping it down and not going further.
Could you start with a large piece of sculpture in the sense of then just kind of then pare it down?
I guess using Miles as an example, because I have to use proxies
Yeah.
because I can't talk about my thoughts or feelings. And I'm going to look over here. So this is an example. Miles in second grade would only write 2 lines, even with a prompt. And so his teachers in this artsy school would say, "We don't know what's wrong. You know, he only writes 2 lines. Look what all the other kids are writing." And I said, "Well, what are they writing? Have you read it?" And this, blah, blah, blah. Like, look at these exquisite sentences he wrote. And my ex-wife would get very nervous. But I guess this is what I guess I was just staring into space like this, saying these things. And then in third grade, his teachers said the same thing and suggested that he might need help. And they said, "Well, look, you know, you have a prompt and you do this and right." And I think my mug had just been on the cover of the Times Book Review. And so they told me how I write. Don't you take a prompt and do these things? And I just said, "No, I'm just going to stare into space and then things come. And you just kind of write from the things you see. You just try to depict what you see." And then I went on with my aesthetic appreciation. And I'm trying to change and I'm trying to be so bombastic. But I think because I teach creative writing, which is difficult, you know, I just really line edit and help students talk about what they want to do. There's this notion that you can create a metaphor, which to me sounds insane because it's just happening. Things are just colliding all the time. It's about finding the language to describe what you see. Or that synesthesia is a literary device rather than just a sensorial experience. So as a dyslexic synesthete with some head injuries and some neurodivergence, it's just all going on out there. Just can you take the time? So my problem is like being Black, being poor, being concussed. Why do I keep doing that? That's like, isn't that 20th century? And you see what I'm doing with your question? It's always proxy upon proxy upon proxy upon proxy. Oh no, I'll explain it through Moby Dick. I'll explain it through Sonny's Blues. I'll explain it through the Encyclopedia Britannica. I'll explain it through the red ants and black ants. You know, I can't say to a girl, "I really like you. You have really nice eyes." Like, "Look at these ants." So for me, it's not a question of generating things. It's a question of just cutting things and just getting my head to be still, if this is any kind of representation. It's like,
So just let me follow up and say that if when you delivered that chapter to Elizabeth Schmitz, like what was that back and forth like?
there's no better.
Okay, okay,
What Elizabeth has done for me, my first book is handed to her, and I have a little bit of OCD, which can be a good thing when you're properly fed and fed good sleep and exercise. So she doesn't really edit. She more supports me. And so I check in, "Is this insane?" And she'll say, "No." Okay. She's like, just stop. It's fine. Just let it be. And over the years, I've gotten to trust it.
great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Sure.
So listening to you read reminded me of how my heart felt back in 2006 when I was reading Man Gone Down. And that was like, I don't know, I feel like I was in that book for like 4 days. And and then here you are right now with that same voice that was on the page then. So that was I just wanted to say that. And my question is, now that you know you're neurodivergent, does anything as an artist make sense that didn't used to make sense? Or are you kinder to yourself in like some way about things that you went through to become this writer that you are?
Thank you. It changes almost minute by minute. Sometimes I joke about it. Sometimes I haven't arrived at that place. I'm not there yet. I still say awful things to myself in my head. Uh, but I'm also just used to it. And it depends. If I'm around some of my closest friends who are like me, I don't think about it. When I'm in a group or the minute we break and I'm in the group of people, it feels acute and strange and I feel quite like a freak. So yeah, there are some answers, but it's so old, it just feels like grief now. Feel pretty sad about it. I feel great sadness for my mother. She was alone with 3 kids in Boston, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and just trying to do the best she could and getting us the best education. She just was scared of me and scared for me mostly. And I don't know. I think at this point, if I've changed anything, the difference between Miles and Miles is typically white. He's green eyes. He's had 2 loving parents and he was relatively safe walking through the world. I was not. I just had to shut it down. And in order to be present and not be, name the things that could happen to a small boy who has one parent trying to look out for them, I had to become hyper vigilant and be grindingly present. And so that was a choice I made. And so now I'm just unraveling that. I've also thought that I could make myself disappear in plain sight, but that's not true. I don't have those magical powers of being inconspicuous. But as for writing, without being grinding and obsessive and controlling, I realized how dyslexic I am. Like I was not reading from the page because I can't read from the page. I have to photograph and read it from my head. So the book is kind of a prop. I can only spell with my right hand on the page, both my left hand on the board because I was left-handed, but then maybe right-handed. I can't type. I have to find a new healthy coping mechanism rather than just like grinding myself to make things happen. Yeah. So
Don't grind your teeth.
Yeah. Did you notice that? That's the espresso. That's not trauma. Thank you for the question, if I answered it.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much. I didn't realize you were the author when we were downstairs taking pictures. So I'm quite embarrassed when you got up there. I was like, wait a minute, who's that guy? But thank you so much for your vulnerability. Thank you so much for your honesty. It takes a lot to talk about being neurodivergent and talk about being Black in America. And I'm so excited. Didn't read the first book, didn't know who you were. Nice to meet you.
Nice to
I
meet
got
you.
your picture in my phone. There we go. But I I loved your description of your mother. I can't wait to read more and find out more. But I grew up here in San Francisco, not in Boston, but the can of bacon grease, the skillet, all of those descriptions, the washcloth and putting the skillet back into the oven with the cloth. It's just all of those things that seem so familiar. And as a Black American, I think there's just this symbiotic relationship that we share. And so I'm excited to read the book. Thank you for your vulnerability and so nice to hear you.
I'm sorry, I'm seeing myself flip salami into the dog. That skillet eventually became the dog dish.
That That's so good.
Now I see like a remember Gravy Train, yeah, check wagon.
Yeah.
So, like I'm watching the wagon right now. So that's what's going on. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more. Anybody? Yeah.
I loved the way you described walking with your son. Were you in the ramble in Central Park? Like, where were you looking for the birds?
Everywhere, really.
Right.
Our plan was to go see Pale Mail, which is much further north,
Oh, yeah.
right? And it was about to rain. So we went in. Well, I didn't read the 5 pages before about getting there.
Ah.
And
From Brooklyn.
from Brooklyn and remembering if we drove or getting back. And yeah. So, yeah, it's like, here we go. We're off, right? But getting lost in the park.
But
right?
it was also very much like New Yorkers like to like butt in on somebody else's conversation and follow.
I don't consider myself a New Yorker. Sorry. You're a Bostonian.
No, no, I'm a New Yorker.
Oh,
I grew up in the Bronx.
okay.
Yeah.
I can accept the
Is there one more? Yes. Okay. Yeah, we have time.
You know, I truly waited between both books, and I'm so happy to see your a review, and finally I was going to get to meet you. I never thought that would ever happen, but my question is, given your inner journey and your journey teaching students and being in the outside world, can you imagine this country healing and coming to some form of peace with itself? And might the young people, the younger generation that you're teaching, be the ones to facilitate it?
Yeah, well, when Trump was first elected, my oldest, who's 29 now, he looked at me and he said, "What do we do?" And I said, "Well, you are a land wealthy, cash poor wasp. So you need to, no, really, you have this incredible education and you have 2 parents and you have a safety net. It has to be you. You can't go and work on Wall Street. And when you're 60, then donate something because you've lost 2 or 3 generations. You, the best and the brightest, and the talented, the 10%, have to run for public office. You have to work in local government if you want something to change, and it's going to take a long time." Right now, yeah, was Baldwin in just above my head, his last novel says, "Love sets the imagination on fire." One can never truly know someone they love, right? So the imagination fails trying to imagine the other person, right? Because if you know the person you love, that's probably not love. That's something else, right? That's convenience. So, from Baldwin to Wordsworth, yes, I can imagine a place. I hear Mavis, I know a place, right? I'll take you there, or come go with me. But then, as Eliot says, there's prayer, observance, discipline, thought, and action. So in my students, yes, like I see how they're dealing with ICE. I have a lot of first generation students, first generation college, first generation American, first generation or first generation parents who are too scared to go to graduation or go to the doctor. And so how they're coming to these challenges and how this first cohort of high schoolers who went full time in person, they seem almost rejuvenated. And so also, I think about Dylan. Like I have over the last 3 years, I've had 2 students who have transitioned while taking my classes and doing independent studies. So they're an HRT. And this last one in particular, well, they would both get beaten up on the subways, harassed constantly. And they'd come and I would think about what I can do. And the only thing I felt I could do was go find the person who did it to them and just beat the living shit out of them. And these are 2 relatively small people. And if the only thing I can offer is violence for somebody who's been suffering violence, like really all their lives, like I have no place in this new world. So, Dylan, right? Come mothers and fathers, right? Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command, right? Your old world is rapidly aging. Get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, right? So I have to look to them and like really for the first time listen to what my students need rather than enforce what I think they have to do. And that's a strange transition. And it's really just ceding power, right? And it's just understanding I don't have power over their lives other than to just keep them from falling in the cracks someday, or just like knowing that they need a cup of coffee, or stop being an asshole to them, right? Or have them watch me be horrible to someone else. And this just perpetuates violence. If that answers your question. But yeah, I am, of
Thank you.
course, hopeful
Thank
about
you
this
so much.
country. Can we do one more for my OCD? This didn't feel.
Yeah.
Anybody have a good thing question?
Closing
Can
question.
I? Okay.
Here, let me pass it to you because they're not going to hear you.
Having read your book, Michael, I just have to say that was really a beautiful reading. I just was profoundly moved by your words, thoughtfulness. It just was very effective. And I thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'll take one more.
I'm sort of disappointed because I had a ticket for tonight. No one asked to see it. So there we go. So now, so now, after 17 years, what's next?
Coming over here, I wish that during the, in these last 17 years, I'd written a lot. And so I would have greatest hits and I could just say, what are you doing? I'm writing a book about my mom.
Nice.
It's going to be small and journalistic. And it's really about labor. My mom and I had a really difficult relationship. But we loved each other dearly too. She just never knew how to speak to me, and I never knew how to speak to her. But what we could do is do things. Like she always worked, no matter what. And my relationship to her was having her watch me work, and not write or teach, but like retile the bathroom or fix the car or the washing machine. She was really scared of me, but once the washing machine broke and the repairman, the Maytag man came over and the tub was loose and it was just really a screw that was hard to get to. And he took the screw out and he said, it's going to be X amount of dollars. And this is probably 1979, so 12. And she said, I don't have that kind of money. And he looked at her, which I later realized was provocatively. There are other ways to pay. And she just walked away. He dropped the screw back in. So then I spent all night taking the washing machine apart and fixing it. And I fixed the washing machine. I was just so happy. So my mother, over the years, has always appreciated that I work. So this is about like going to a haunted house in MAGA country, starting the summer of 2020, and working to rebuild a flooded house. And my colleagues and other writers saying, why do you do that? Because I need money, one. And also, it feels real. So I don't feel like a writer or an artist. I like making things. So it's her journey from the Jim Crow South, last place to integrate Hampton, Sydney, Virginia, Farmville, Moton High School, 1951. I have a picture of her looking at a burn cross. It just goes back to Wales. It's just about her up south journey and then having a kid like me and us trying to get along. But like, why will I go and try to make $500 moving somebody in a U-Haul and not like go right for the whatever. I don't know what that is, but I do know how to like have awesome tools. You have better tools though. So that's what the next book is about.
Can't wait.
And bears and demon trees and the Witch King of Agmar, if anybody knows who that is. Thank you so much.